Hello, everyone. Welcome to Lo Kya Kahenge. In this podcast today, we're going to be talking about something that's related to the human experience. We're going to be talking about emotions, feelings, things that we don't talk about on a daily. And who better to do this with than my sisters, who helped me through thick and thin. We have Kinza and Minal.
Hi.
Hi.
How's it going, guys?
Good.
Thanks for that beautiful introduction. It's every time.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Well, I meant it with all my heart because, I think friendship is a part of a good outlet for when we're trying to regulate ourselves in terms of how we're feeling, right? I feel like as human beings, we put on this mask when we go out in public to hide what we're truly feeling. Because the heart and the mind, when we're in a certain space, we all have an opinion. We all have something that comes up for us, but we don't necessarily always share it. And we don't necessarily have healthy outlets to sort of diffuse that.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And it comes out in various ways. It comes out in negative ways, such as projection. It comes out in our work, comes out in our performance, in all our relationships. So what do you guys think about regulating the self? Do you think it's an easy task? Can you think of any moment in your life that is shareable, that is maybe a moment where you caught yourself and you were alone, just yourself, your consciousness, and you decided that you wanted to sort of try and look back on those feelings and deal with it?
And we are talking about like any feelings, right? Any feelings. Okay, so I had promised myself I'm not going to talk about it, but like a really big feeling that hit us this past week was the passing of Kobe Bryant and the other 8 people on board, and they were all feelings of just unfiltered grief and sorrow and shock and disbelief. And I think that was a day. It's interesting because you said that when you're with yourself, how you're reflecting on those feelings. It was it was both, right? It was a lot of both. It was like expressing feelings with other people in my house. We actually had a debate for the next 4 hours about this, following the news. And then it was a lot about reflecting it within yourself. And I think that the way that we dealt with all of that was talking through the point of what just happened. If we have the chance, we'll go into that a little bit, but talking about just the feelings part of it, we were able to talk through those feelings with one another, kind of understand, because we had different perspectives of what just happened and what it all means. And then we had the days following, we had the chance to really think about it on a personal level and what it means to us and how that translates into what we are and who we are and what we do in our lives. So I think that if I'm thinking of who we are when we are by ourselves, or our feelings are by ourselves, I think that we are very hard on ourselves and we try and find examples and things happen. This one, I really thought it through. Something that I've never, exactly done with other feelings always. Mm-hmm. Other times it has been that if in the past I've been angry, which has happened with me, I've had a moment or two where I've had, in 2 years ago, I had a panic attack and I was angry because the situation was not going very well. And I actually threw my phone across the room. And that was so not who I am that it scared me. So, I'm trying to explain to you how I just managed my feelings a week ago versus how I managed them about 2.5 years ago. And so I was not in the right headspace. Number one, I did not have the right tools to manage that feeling. I did not have enough education to even realize, an education on anxiety and stressors, to realize that I'd just gone through a panic attack. And, so I guess at that moment, I knew when that happened and I didn't recognize myself, I knew that something had to change. So besides the obvious stuff like checking myself into therapy and stuff like that, I consciously made a couple of decisions in my life, such as removing as much, stressing material from my life as possible. That included people, other stressors, and integrating things like meditation, acupuncture, things that did not come overnight. I still had to do my research about it. I had to experiment. I had to play with like what works, what doesn't work. I learned to, believe it or not, like lean on people, something that I hadn't done before. And so again, 2.5 years later, where I'm sitting right here, I'm happy a very sad thing happened last Sunday, but I'm happy that grief or that anger did not, it did not have the same reaction. This time, after working on myself for like 2.5, 3 years, I had the tools to be able to think through things properly and channel that. I'm happy to say I channeled that grief and that anger into something positive. And that's why I guess the two examples matched. Sorry for taking up a bunch of time, but I thought that was like two big things in my life right now that I could think of immediately and link them. And as to like, how researching and putting the time in yourself is actually an investment to build a set of tools that you can rely on in case something big happens.
Really, I really, really, truly appreciate you sharing that story with us, because honestly, you don't know how many hearts you're going to touch by sharing that story. It's inspiring, because the thing is, they say that experience is the best teacher, right? The fact that you learned all the tools and all the things you need to regulate yourself and sort of tackle the situation again, if it ever came, even when you're not ready, is something that's very respected. And I think the most respected part of your story is that you seek help. And a lot of people are hesitant to seek help, and it's okay. It's absolutely what you were saying. It's not an overnight thing.
No.
It takes time.
Yeah.
It takes a lot of time. And I feel like it's okay. A lot of times we're always fearing what other people are thinking, whether it be how we're expressing ourselves emotionally, or how, if somebody finds out that we're seeking help, how they're going to react. We're always fearful of people's reactions and their judgments. But I feel like when we're alone with ourselves, like you said, you can sort of be your authentic self. You can take your feelings and sort of express them. Sometimes we get into this mode where it's like, was that really me? Like a panic attack or throwing the phone or whatever it might be. And, it kind of comes down to being ready to express yourselves in various amounts of ways, in a vast amount of ways, and to be okay with that, and to be like, okay, this happened, and now what do I need to do next?
Right.
I think that's really important, and I'm like just really proud of you for sharing that story.
Well, thanks. I'm sorry for I guess starting on a really awkward note, which is heavy, but I feel like this week was heavy, and honestly, but it does hearten me as well. And I think that's one of the tools that I'm talking about. When I started going to the therapist actually, my therapist said, you need what you're lacking is literally that, a tool set for you to say, okay, I'm dealing with grief today. I'm dealing with sadness today. I'm dealing with depression today. What do I need, from this to picking up? So I guess me sitting here a week later and being able to talk about all the positive things that this man did and, those people did, and how this mentality that he had and how we can learn from it. That's me relying on my tool set to say, this is not like a black hole. There's some really good things about this that you can learn from. Absolutely.
I agree 100%. I mean, listen, after Kobe Bryant's death and his young age really set me back in my personal life in terms of remembering my young uncle who passed away, who was really close to me. Mm-hmm. And I kept thinking about him. And that's when I guess the locks come off me compartmentalizing. Yeah. It's like something happens in your life and then you're reminded of some past trauma, right? And you know what? I guess in that moment I realized that we all relapse into this cycle of mental health. And it's the more we realize that we can't avoid it, we can only deal with it. Yeah. That's the day things are going to get better within ourselves. Yeah. Because that day I really did keep to myself. I didn't want to project on anybody. I didn't want to let anything out. I was also when I saw everything happening, I shared one post about it and I was like, okay, now I don't really want to interact with anybody right now because I'm feeling a certain way. Yeah. And, I mean, I guess that's just the way I dealt with it. Yeah. And it wasn't more me shutting down. It was me saving everybody else around me from an attitude or something. Right. And I feel if more people did that, especially in our culture, it would lighten the situations a bit.
Yeah.
Especially at like, we always talk about gatherings, family gatherings and stuff. And it's like when people have their own financial distress or family situations, you can see it. It's visible because they're sort of they don't have a healthy way they don't have an outlet. So it just comes out.
Yeah.
And spreads.
Yeah, I agree. Couple of points. I think first of all, what you were talking about, how people, I think it's all about outlook, what your outlook is on a certain thing, whether it's somebody's death or something small, just how your week is going. I think outlook has a big hand in that. Secondly, I believe that it's actually funny because you can feel it happening to you when you think that something's like wrong with you, or it's like, oh, like this is not really me. Maybe like I should seek help or whatever. Like you mentioned your panic attack or whatever. Not whatever, like your panic attack. Edit that out. That was really ignorant. But you can actually feel it happening to you, and that's when you're like, okay, time to do something. But at the same time, I think that everybody has a different approach to what helps them. It's not necessarily always meditation. It's not necessarily always therapy or acupuncture. Sometimes it's like, oh, like you just said, I'm going to keep to myself and I'm not going to, talk to anybody. And I think that if people started respecting that aspect a little bit more, how one person decides to deal with their emotions or whatever they're feeling, I think that would be very helpful to a lot of people. But at the same time, that person is like, if it's going on for a prolonged time, and if you think that then they could use some help, then you need to like push them and be like, hey, like go get help. Yeah.
So depending on the situation and the person, the perspective, the lens, that's how the trauma or the situation or whatever the circumstances are is interpreted. Yeah. And I believe so my self-care is video games, journaling, and reading a lot of books that have to do with self-help. And when I have that scope with me, it's like I know the days that I'm not feeling well, and that's how I'm going to sort of deal with it, so I can get back to what I need to do. And even before I was a counselor in training or a therapist in school, I was always an empath. So if you remember in Cormac High School, when there was a lot of tragedies, we would have moments of silence. Now, I would be sort of one of the 3 only people who were actually really crying during the moment of silence. What does that mean? Does it mean that everybody else around me is wrong for the way that they're expressing themselves? Absolutely not. No. It's just that that's the way I handled it. Right. Being the only guy doing that is a whole nother story. However, me being fearful of that judgment in the moment also made it so I was filtering myself. And then guess what happened? The rest of the day, I was very sad because I didn't get that chance to just let it out because I was so fearful about what other people are going to think about me.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that how it connects to our culture is that sometimes you seem to be disrespectful if you're not talking to somebody or if you're not saying how you're feeling. That translates into, hey, she's so rude, she's not talking to anybody, that just immediately translates into disrespect. But at the same time, if you have people close to you, like my sister here, she understands if she needs, if it's me and I'm not really talking to her, or the rest of the family, my dad would be like, oh my god, what's wrong with her? It's he would be on my case, what's wrong with her? And then she would be like, Dad, listen, she's fine. She's just going through a lot of schoolwork and stress and stuff like that. And the same, I try to do that with her. If she is sleeping, quote unquote, in bed, doesn't want to come out for dinner or something, I will tell him, hey, she's sleeping. She's had a hard day. Let her be. I think it's important to have that, those kind of people around you who are close enough to understand that, hey, she's okay, she just needs some time.
Of course. And I think that's an intercultural theme where it's people forget that this is not the Band-Aid model. You can't just fix it. You can't just stitch it up and it'll be done. I feel when you have a mental wound or you're hurt so much that you feel you have a tear in your heart, there's different ways to deal with it, and it takes a lot more time than healing like something that's medical. Like it's not like you can get vaccinated for depression, right? No one's immune to it.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So when we get these like comments about like, oh, why are you acting like this? I guess it comes from a place where people don't understand that like somebody's sad day can last for a week and somebody's sad day can come out as anger. And there's just different ways of expressing it, different ways it shows up. And it's important to remember not to take it personally. Like growing up, I used to take it personally. Like if somebody else was having a bad day, and I always used to be like, oh my God, I did something wrong.
Yeah.
Like that paranoia of it in itself is a feeling of mental health too.
That
so.
Personally, I deal with that so much. Like I'm like, okay, I'm full exposing myself right now, but like I'll be like, yeah, everybody's supposed to deal with my attitudes, but like if somebody is having a bad day, or if they are not talking to, not me specifically, but just in general, or they're like, hey, like I'm having a bad day. That's it. They don't want to talk anymore. I'll very much so take that personally, and I don't like. I'm working towards that, and I'll just like give them their space. But then then I'm thinking, okay, but maybe what if they want me to talk to them and ask them like if they're okay or how was their day? So it's like I have to like figure that part out. But I think everybody goes through that because you're right. The paranoia is too much. Like, oh, maybe I did something wrong. Maybe that's why they're not talking to me. But then you want to also find out if they're okay.
Yeah, it's a double-edged sword completely.
One thing that Manahil is, mentioning here is great, but there's one thing she's also not mentioning. Our relationship of, allowing each other that space or like covering for one another has not come overnight either. And that is us fully disclosing ourselves. We've had tremendous amounts of fights, not a small scale, fight either, but like a lot of fights that has, because I want to make sure, there's always like, we've never really treated each other like, oh, I'm the older sister and you're the younger sister. But I do have this protective instinct for my sisters, and they have it, right back at me. So of course you're worried that, if your sister hasn't spoken to you for like 2 days, or, that's how she's processing her feelings. But I didn't understand that right away. And I think that had we not had the hard conversations and like really heartbreaking fights and, just, I want to say again, years of going through, because she's not me and I'm not her. And, she has different ways of expressing herself than I do. And that includes hard feelings like grief or anger. It's just, that I think I've seen that so much happen in our culture where like, that just might be the way that they are doing things, and we need to learn how to either protect them and support them and empower them to do so, because that's their way. However, and I'm going to open up this question to you both as well, is that what is the line that you would gladly cross when you think that this person is going through a hard time and maybe needs some help? Because let's not forget that the people who, like for example, and this kind of touches on the question you were just asking, is that maybe they want me to talk to them, so like, because I've seen honestly, lives and even our family get so messed up because people around them never asked them if they needed help. These people, and I myself was one of them, are sometimes still am, where it's like they're so stressed that anxiety is already taking over their brains and they're already shutting themselves out. So they're definitely not thinking straight. They're not thinking that, oh, I should go get some water, or I should do some exercise, or I should eat, or I should even check myself into therapy. They're not thinking those things because they can't. Anxiety is awful. It's an illness. It's a disease. It's, very much a condition, even though it's invisible. But like, when does one cross over the line and say, okay, I think I've given them enough space, but I think they need help, and I'm going to suggest that, hey, let me help, or do you think you need help? I mean, is that a thing?
I'm a big proponent of breaking the cycle. If you see something happening for years, try and be the person who's going to throw the wrench in the wheel and try to make it stop. However, if it's detrimental to your own mental health and you feel like you don't have the tools or the capacity or the competency to handle the situation, then don't do it. There has been many times in my life, even being in this major, where I did not feel competent, right? Because I'm not done. I'm not licensed.
Yeah.
But when you have that knowledge and you see that something wrong is happening, let me tell you, it gives a lot of invisible wounds. And the other thing is, when you're trying to approach a situation, there's a fine line between aggression and assertiveness. And the thing that that divides aggression or separates aggression and assertiveness is reacting. Aggression is a reaction, whereas assertiveness is you're doing something with a goal in mind. You're putting your foot down because you're telling them, I want to throw a wrench in this wheel and end the cycle. So if you want to end the cycle of people not helping, being oblivious to helping, because that's the thing too, or trying to tell someone to get help, I think that sometimes your gut instinct, your sixth sense is I'm telling you, like, it's a 50-50 thing, but I would take your chance. I would shoot your shot and try to approach the situation with as much empathy as possible.
I agree. Yeah. I think that you're right. There is a fine line between both of those things that you mentioned. I think, though, however, that when you think when is it the time to like go approach them and be like, hey, you need help? Well, there's two, I feel, sides to that. Number one, you never know like what the other person is actually going through, because half the time maybe they don't even know what they're going through, honestly. Like, who really ever knows how I'm feeling this way, why I'm feeling this way? Nobody really knows that. So maybe they don't want to give you the wrong answer and then make you more worried about them, you know. Secondly, I think that when it's absolutely time to like tell them to go get help, maybe if they're getting physical, maybe if they're like having physical panic attacks, maybe if they're not getting out of bed for like 3 months straight, maybe if like their way of handling their emotions is getting in the way of them doing their everyday work or succeeding or achieving what they wanna, then it's time for them to like go get help.
Absolutely. And I guess the other side to that, because it's always like 4 sides to any story. The other side is telling someone to get help may be a trigger. So being very careful that have they heard this before? Are they do they hate therapy for some reason, because they might have like some past trauma with it, such as a previous life event where they sought help and they got a really bad therapist, because that's a thing too. Yeah. That is the thing. A therapist is a human being, and not every single therapist is a good therapist, right? So understanding who you're talking to, right? Making sure that what you're saying isn't triggering. And you know what? It's not as easy as I'm saying as it is, right? Like, to gauge if somebody is going to be triggered or not is something that I can't even, like, my professor, and I know a lot of people, it's to this day, they can't do it.
Yeah.
They can't do it. And then they've been doing this for years. They've been doing counseling for years, and they just still can't. It's very hard because everyone has a different way of putting on their mask, their fake smile, or their authentic self. And you can't tell that.
Yeah. That reminds me of another thing that we were thinking we're going to talk from, the episode today is feeling how we do, in a group of people, or feeling what you've just said, what you've described is sometimes people put on a face, people think that they need to act a certain way. There's a whole like syndrome, right? Imposter syndrome, that people are victim of. And frankly, me too. Like, despite being really good at something, you think that you don't belong. That's very much the definition of, for me, the imposter syndrome. So, how do you deal with those, especially in our culture? Our culture is filled with, stereotypes that people inflict, and that is itself, falls under the category of projection.
Yes.
Correct?
Yes.
So if my sister, for example, right, she does not like to be, or if I don't like to be, very loud in a group or something, or if I like to be sitting in a corner. I've talked about this before. My mom, she actually hasn't condition, but like, despite her condition, her personality is so, she doesn't like to, be the crazy loud auntie, saying things that are not making any sense. So, but people judge that.
No, it's true.
They judge that, and they have a pre-assumptuous, comment about her every single time.
I don't know how people have the audacity to say what they're saying, but also they don't have the education or the experience or the tidbits from their life or their life events to notice that, what if that was you in that place? What if somebody else was saying that about you when you were being loud? You know what I mean? We always have this assumption of what we're supposed to be. We carry around this ruler. Yeah. And because of this ruler, the ruler being societal expectations, we can never really be authentic to ourselves, whether it be a cultural issue, a religious issue, an identity issue,
I agree.
an orientation issue. I mean, there's so many different ones.
And like in that regard, I guess our mom is like 100% authentic, because no, she's not gonna put on that mask and come be loud with you while you're eating around the table. She loves to sit in the corner and eat her food because that's what makes her comfortable, and she's not gonna get out of her comfort zone just to like please other people.
And guess what? It's okay.
And that's okay. You know, she's not putting on that mask.
Okay.
She's probably the most authentic person I know.
Yeah, she's going to be that way, either, you know, going back to our title, if somebody's watching or not watching. And how much more can you like ask for yourself? You don't have, reminds me of that, you know, movie with like multiple identities. Do you know how hard it is and draining it is and exhausting it is to be different identities all the time?
All the time.
Yeah.
All the time.
Which you are in every single setting that you're in.
And don't you kind of have to be? I mean, I'm just like wondering, a lot of spaces we find ourselves demand that we be different kinds of people, right? So how do you be you when no one's watching, and in this world that is filled with expectations of all these roles that we are trying to fill, correct?
I was just going to say that about roles, but I think it's important to realize that wearing different masks and fulfilling different roles are two separate issues or separate things of it in itself, because it's like when you're at work, like you're putting on a work role because you're in a professional environment, right? You're not going to be the same person that you are at a club because you don't want to act that way, right? But what I'm talking about with mask is like, okay, I am this like person in front of the cool kids, like using the high school concept because it's the most easiest to understand. I always use the high school concept. You're acting a certain way because you want to be with the cool kids. You're juuling. You're using the Juul, the vape, because the other kids are doing it. Right. But at the same time, like, your father's a heart surgeon and he knows the adverse effects of nicotine use or whatever. Right. And you're just kind of hiding that part of yourself and not being true to it. And and just to make the story a little bit more interesting, you're also interested in med school. Right. So like, you know, like, and you're doing this just to please other people. Right. See what I mean with that story? And 100%. It's like, honestly though, like a lot of people always tell me, it's like, oh, Taha, but like you seem like you know how to handle yourself and things like that. I'm like, right. No. I had bad days, and guess what? Just like you guys, it took me a long time to get where I am today. In high school, I was not my authentic self until the latter half of my high school experience, and it was because I wasn't comfortable with who I was, and it was through like freshman and sophomore year where I was still thinking about like, okay, how could I be the black sheep of my family, but also be authentically cultural, authentically myself. And then I guess come junior year, I realized that if I spread positive messages, like that'll be the way that I handle my own baggage. But it didn't work that way. It didn't hit me until like maybe community college or when I was doing my bachelor's, both being in psych, so constantly being reminded about how to self-improve, right? So during those constant reminders, those constant courseworks which promoted self-growth, it occurred to me that that wasn't a good way to handle it. For me to just spread positive messages but still holding on to my own baggage wasn't a good way of expression. And the way that I am now is because now I have these healthy outlets and I have these groups of friends where I'm fulfilling a role of being my authentic self, not putting on a mask. But then when I'm in a group of family that has different views than me, then I'm in a different position. I'm in a different headspace. And I spend less time with them because I'd rather be with my chosen family because they like me for who I am. Because, Reddy, I know on this podcast we focus a lot on cultural differences and, you know, gender differences. But the other difference is that people are different on so many different levels, on a vast number of levels. Personality and character are not to be categorized by what family you were born in, right? You can literally be yourself. You can be off what the pattern is of the family. Like you don't have to, you know, be on the same bandwagon as everyone else. Yeah. And I decided to break that barrier, to throw a wrench in that cycle when I wanted to become a career that nobody in my family chose. Nice. Right. And then I also decided to be my authentic self with my friends, my family, my coworkers, my cohort in grad school. So I believe that fulfilling a role and wearing a mask, there's a line between them, and then that line between assertiveness, aggressive, or being aggressive. And also that line between not dealing with your baggage or not managing your baggage and compartmentalizing. To realize that how close some of these things are to each other will 110% help you.
Yeah. And what's honestly, it's missing as part of our education as human beings, being part of the, families and cultural background that we are from. And again, it's this podcast is not to light fire to what our
of course,
beliefs are or anything. It's not about that at all. It's just recognizing that there's an issue and solving it and hoping that you solve it. Unfortunately, I've had friends, and I know friends that are just and in absolute, their parents don't understand them because they are, they have some sort of like a photocopy image of what their kids should be.
The ruler.
Yeah, the ruler. And like that I don't know I don't even know what kind of rule book they have.
It's expectations, societal expectations, cultural expectations.
Yeah. And so how do you expect somebody to be themselves? And, and say that, this is, I mean, if that was the case, there are a lot of things that we don't, tell about ourselves. I feel like if we did, people would be like, we would all be it would be a really hard world to live in if we all just did not have our barriers and boundaries. I feel I'm not talking about craziness or like people being psychopaths. I'm not saying that at all. But what I'm saying is that if there was just some level of understanding and some basic education of like allowing people to be themselves, and if there was just some sort of like, how we teach kids or we've been taught to sit properly at the table or like go to school or blah, blah, blah. Maybe there has to be some sort of like mandatory education about, hey, kid, it's okay to be yourself and address the mental health component of it, because those boys, they grow up to be men who then project their anger unfairly towards women in ways. Then there's those women, who become like super either very, 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 reserved into themselves, and some lead to really, really awful things like suicides, or, they literally live the only one lifetime that they're given in like a lot of depression, or they get sick. And then some women that honestly I know, unfortunately, from some side of the family, they become evil, and they, they project their anger in like by hurting other people.
Revenge.
Yep. Yeah, seriously.
Revenge.
Anywhere from like microaggressions, like pettiness, to revenge. That's how projection
so scary.
And it's still projection though at the end of the day.
And that's what their kids learn.
Oh,
it's so scary.
Don't even get me. Yeah. But yeah, no, you're absolutely right. Because that's how the cycle starts. Remember how we were talking about breaking the cycle? Well, let's start with the origins of the cycle.
Yeah.
Parenting.
Yeah.
If parents don't deal with their own baggage, if they all don't deal with their own baggage, where do you think it's going to go? And I'm not saying as a unit, as husband and wife. I'm saying as husband separately, significant other separately.
Yeah.
Or wife separately and significant other separately.
Yeah.
It goes towards each other first.
Absolutely.
That's what I've always seen.
No, but like even when you're married, there's going to be times when you're alone, right?
There has to be. I think people need to understand that. I don't have any experience with marriage, trust me. But I've only had experience with the marriages I've seen around me, and the idea of being alone in a marriage, it needs to be put to light more. It's normal. You don't have to be together like 24/7.
And right now it's frowned upon. Like if, for example, like, oh my God, no, I know I respect my husband, or like, no, I never meant that. No, we have to understand that these, again, rules or like some sort of like definitions that has been handed by somebody are not word of God.
Like etched in stone.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. It's not like, so like what you're saying, it's unfortunate that the projection becomes on each other, and especially in our culture where like divorces are so frowned upon. And do you know what happened to divorcees, both male and female? So like, that's not an option. That's not a culturally acceptable option anyway. I'm talking about, again, the subcontinent. And the other, then what do you have to do? Well, you're forced than to like, be nice to each other.
Yeah.
Do you know how hard it is to be nice to somebody in your own home
that you have no connection with?
Yeah.
It is crazy house.
Wouldn't it just be easier to understand that, hey, she or he might need some space for a little bit and let me leave them be, instead of, facing it right at the moment. And then that just leads up to like nowhere, no result.
I mean, also talking about it not to the person also leads nowhere. Like everything in life is equilibrium, right?
Right.
However, I do want to add one thing, and that's human beings are like batteries. When we're separated, we're charging. Right?
It's true.
We're not ready yet. If I'm at, we always talk about glass being half full or half empty, but I think a better way to put it is a battery, right? So like if you have 50% battery, 20% battery, we're on low power mode. Like it shows.
It shows.
It shows. And if we're on 100% battery, how did you get there, by the way? 100% battery is like what? Like anything we say in every episode. Taking care of yourself and finding healthy outlets.
Yeah.
But I feel like when you combine that with like multicultural or if you're like a black sheep like I am, then what happens is that because you're different or because people don't get you, it shows in many ways. Yeah. When I was growing up, for me, honestly, I think the most like power usage from my battery pack was because of me not being my authentic self.
Oh, you hit such a great point.
Right.
Something I always say, please, don't waste your brain energy on things that give you absolutely no return on investment. I just think of it that way. So like if I'm going to put my thinking skills and my time, which is the scarcest resource in the world, right? If I'm going to put it towards something, then it might as well give me some return on investment, And so like, why am I going to waste my brain energy on like, and it takes more energy, right? Like you're projecting your negative self on somebody, you're breaking into a fight with them, and then you're taking double the amount of time to try and apologize because there's nowhere else to go. It doesn't make any sense to me. Like something that should have been, and again, and you know why that happens is because people don't build in the right tools.
Yep.
In themselves or their relationships to even address that fact. So like, for instance, I'm known to have a short temper and I get that from my dad. So I'm not hinting anything, but I think that like, whenever something goes wrong for me, I like snap, do you know how my relationships have been so broken because I had done that? Now, again, like 2.5 years later, not 100% perfect, but at least like I have allowed myself to either put some space between me and the person that I'm going to react to immediately, take some time to just calm down somewhere, or like, find other ways to communicate with them. There's this one example of a relationship where we could not even look at each other's faces. This person, in that moment, I truly knew I hated this person with my whole heart. But it was imperative. It was imperative that we talk if we were not going to just never see each other again. All right. And the way that we communicated, maybe this has something to do with the fact that I'm an interaction designer. I literally design interactions for people. But I found a piece of paper for me and for them. And literally, we sat there and I wrote what I wanted to write and I gave it to them and they wrote what they wanted to write. And then gave the paper back, and this is how we communicated that day.
That's impressive.
And our relationship still stands like 7 years later. But I'm telling you right now, it was so hard to do. It was one of those like dark places that you never want to be with a person because you just get that's part of what I feel is projection. 100 million things were happening. You were talking about microaggressions, like, setting up that, explosion. Yeah, that was happening. And on top of all of this was this interaction, right? And so finding that, I guess, way, something that we don't learn from I didn't learn that from my adults, to be honest, if I'm being honest.
I didn't as well.
My parents are amazing, but this is one thing that they could possibly improve on too, because we are all growing here. But I've seen a lot of our family members just going off, being like, absolute explosions.
Yep, I have family members that are taking time bombs too, because when they're at 20% battery, even like giving them like a simple task or saying hello to them is like a trigger, and they just go off.
Yeah.
I haven't learned that from my parents either. My dad when he's not in the right headspace, he'll become like, he'll mask it with jokes and sarcasm. And then my mom is the one who puts her foot down. She's very assertive. So it's like, it's like this weird dynamic where I never learned a healthy way to deal with anything. So, I did have to teach myself that.
Yeah.
However, I did want to ask you a question. When you did that writing exercise, when you exchanged papers, I think that is really mature, and like doing that at 20% battery, I mean, like you said, you shared with us your feelings that it wasn't easy. However, did any third person tell you to suggest that, or you guys came up with that yourselves?
Yeah, no, it was just us. And
that's smart.
Yeah.
And that's rare.
Yeah. And again, honestly speaking, if it was the old Kinza, and this was like, I want to say the middle-ish Kinza, where she's still learning, by the way. All right. She's like in a very dark place. I was missing class in the morning because I wasn't going to wake up and go, like, that dark. And I just needed like one way of not feeling crappy, And so that was something that we came up with, because I think that overall, if we start to understand that this person or this entity means more to me than what is just happening in the short run.
Yes.
I think that perspective kind of like enables you to come up with these kinds of solutions. So maybe you're able to preserve some of that and I really do think I'm one of those, I'm not a hopeless romantic by any means. If you know me, you know me.
Mm-hmm.
But I do think that there would be fewer broken relationships in the world if and only if we just started to take everything with just like 5% more patience. And like we came up with creative ideas to say that, I like this person or I like this entity for a reason in the first place. And I've invested and spent all this time with them for a reason in the first place. So maybe like this outbreak or whatever is happening is okay, unless it's absolutely toxic, right?
Exactly.
Unless it's absolutely
toxic. But it's
toxic.
also about checking yourself.
Yes.
View yourself as a context. You're only one perspective. When there's an argument with 2 people, get 4 people involved. See how what you're doing is wrong as well, not just the other person. Because I feel like, especially in our culture, we have these like competitive personalities where it's like used in the wrong places. Yeah. If we're competitive in the right places, let me tell you, I mean, we'd be making money or something. Yeah. But being competitive in the wrong places, like not only like last episode about material goods, but we're competitive in emotional too, where it's like you see like 2 uncles arguing in the living room about politics and they're one-upping each other on anger. Yeah. And it's like, where's this going? Now you're just literally bringing your baggage out. This is not about the same subject anymore, is it? But it's
so unattractive. And
it's very unattractive. I attest to that. But like you said, it's very difficult to, when it's between 2 people, to step back and be like, okay, look, it can be my fault too.
Yeah. I think although the way that relationships work, any kind of relationship, sibling, love, parent, and daughter and son, is that you have to understand the problem from the other person's perspective, always. And it always takes, it's so hard to do that, because everybody thinks, no, I'm right and you're wrong, and you're dumb and I'm smart. But I think that if you head into an argument or a talk thinking in the back of your head that, hey, like, I need to understand where they're coming from, that would actually help your argument so much more.
Absolutely.
Rather than it like escalating. Because fights escalate so quick. It's like fire.
Seconds.
It's fire. It's like 1 minute you're fighting about something, and then the next second you're fighting about the completely different thing.
How are you my sibling? What the?
It like has nothing to do with how you started it.
Yeah.
And this goes for all relationships, I feel like. And then secondly, I feel like, I don't know if you guys agree, but do you think that, we were talking about masks before, putting on a mask is easier than having to deal with explaining to people why you're being the way you are?
Absolutely, because listen, you're putting on a mask is easier than being vulnerable and with someone. Like on this very podcast today, you and I have been quote unquote exposing ourselves. That's being vulnerable, right?
Right.
I mean, like, you know what I mean? I think it's a lot easier to put on a mask, and human beings. I mean, we've always done this. We always chose the easier route. I mean, it's just how it is. I mean, I sometimes I get motivated by, and I've talked about this before, and that's like cavemen, how like they used to just deal with all their surroundings, and they used to be so adamant and stuff. But now, like, because of technology, I don't know, I'm a big proponent that technology is very positive, but I'm also a big proponent that because of its high addictiveness, our distress tolerance level goes down. So we're bothered by everything.
Yeah.
Like,
impatience level.
Impatience and all this. Like, I know because of my phone, like, I've developed an attitude. Like, hold on 1 second, let me check this. Like,
Yeah.
But yeah.
But then that is also, I feel like, considered such a unhealthy outlet, since we were talking about outlets before. Just something I wanted to put out there.
Always choose the right outlet.
I think that's great. I feel do it up until the point that it's working for you and it's beneficial for you. Don't let that hurt you. I know somebody who just can never ever express a negative emotion, and I just worry about them.
Oh my god, that hit home. And I know Minahil is saying this like she's exposing herself, but now this is like exposed to how part 1. I've done this so many times with her. Like to de-escalate arguments, I would become ignorant, and I'll just be like, okay, you know what? I'm not gonna talk to this person because I feel like I'm gonna make it worse. And that took a toll on me growing up because I knew truths about people that they didn't even know about themselves, and I would just take it and be like, all right, I was such a people pleaser. Like I was always a spiritual person, and then in front of these like religious bigots or like people I've met, I would be a people pleaser. I'd be like, oh, you're right. Oh, you're right.
But that's annoying.
But in the back of my mind, guess what? I was having a fight with them in the back of my mind. And that took a toll on my attitude. And growing up, it was very unhealthy baggage to carry around, to just agree with everybody, even though you disagree with them.
But that really, 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 really pisses me off so much when somebody is so extremely positive, even if, they're fighting with somebody about like the worst things possible, and then they're just like taking every single thing you're saying into such a positive way. That pisses me off.
Because it becomes ignorant at that point.
Yeah, I don't know if they're just being ignorant or maybe they're just so happy like that. My dad is one of these people. He loves taking everything into a positive, manner. But that really, really makes me angry. And I don't know if that makes me a bad person.
Nope. There's a time because I think, I'm sorry to cut you off, but I really have to say this. And there's a time and place for everything. Yeah. And because you realize that, you know that it's impossible to be happy all the time. And that's why it bothers you.
Right, exactly. It's like, at this point, are you just not listening to me anymore?
And it becomes insulting then.
Yeah.
To me, that's insulting because, again, going back to my process thing, all right, I will address my feelings by talking through them or processing them.
Yes.
If you don't want to share that with me, that's okay. But don't be dismissive when I say that I'm processing it. Don't say that, oh, don't let this hang over your head or like...
Or how old are you? That's the worst rebuttal I hear all the time when people are like, how old are you? Come on, you could deal with that. No, everyone has their own process. Again, one of the rulers that we carry around from society is what? 18, 22, 30, you're an adult. And adults are supposed to be this rock robot thing that doesn't have any feelings. And let me tell you, I know many adults with many unhealthy feelings and some with healthy feelings, but they're very rare. Just have to put that out there. But honestly, when it comes to like being real, if somebody tells you they're not okay, don't say that, oh, it's all going to get better and things like that. That's actually being dismissive. I know you don't have a bad intention by saying it's going to get better, but there's many other things that you can say that are not so fakely positive, that are more assertive, that are more real, that are like, it's okay not to be okay.
Yeah.
And it's going to take time and you will eventually get better. If you need me, I'm a text away. If you think I'm annoying, I'm leaving. I think when people say things like that, I feel more comfortable sharing my feelings. What about you guys?
I agree.
Yeah.
It makes me wonder about the super, super positive people at all times. It just makes me wonder if like I'm 100% happy if they are that way at all times, but I then wonder about them, who they are when nobody's watching. I wonder that about my dad. I wonder that about him all the time. Like, I know that he's always taking a very, very crazy situation and turning it into a joke, to say out loud for other people. So he hopes that other people laugh. But then I wonder, like, if he's in the bathroom, is he crying to himself?
Before he goes to bed, what's happening? And why I'm relating to this? My dad's the same way.
Yeah.
The same exact way.
Dads are just a whole other character, I feel like.
Yeah, it's like, it's like because in our culture, they're taught to be like sort of this leader of the house, and kardari in translation meaning like home, like someone who takes care of the home, essentially, or the breadwinner. I think that's a better translation. And I think they're so focused on it that they don't have time for themselves. There's so many shows about this where they show like a family member who's taking care of everything, but then they don't have time for themselves, and then something weird happens, like something out of nowhere, this curveball happens, and then they explode, and it's like, why you're exploding is because your glass is full or your battery is low, and you weren't being truthful in these scenarios. You weren't sharing what's happening financially, emotionally, family-wise, friends-wise, and it comes out in these unhealthy ways. And I think the most comfortable, my way of telling if somebody's in a good space or not, or telling if you yourself are in a good place or not. How do you sleep at night in terms of, before you go to sleep, is there any guilt? Before you go to sleep, is there any remorse or what could I be doing better? I mean, it's always very, very healthy to think about what you can do better.
Yeah.
Right? Always healthy. But are you ruminating? Are you ruminating? Are you staying on one topic and you can't sleep because you're like, you know what? I feel really bad. I was angry at everybody today. Assess that. Then you'll realize if you're in a good headspace or not. And then from there, do one of your outlets or self-care and try to understand that maybe the person on the other side was hurt as well.
Yeah. Understanding, developing that like self-awareness is so important. That's self-awareness and that's lacking. That should be one of our, we are always talking about morals and values. That should be part of our characteristics that we develop. Self-awareness. Where am I? Am I projecting too much? How am I feeling? Check in with yourself, right? Like, how am I feeling today? If talking about those moments before bed, do I hold any grudges towards somebody today because I felt awful when they said that? My two partners in my business, one of them said, and I was thankful to her for this. She was like, look, something happened. I was hurt. And I wanted to say that because I'm a transparent person. I can't hold this in. She could have easily, just said, oh my God, I'm going to like hold this over there and I'm going to make their life so difficult.
Or start gossiping and backbiting, which we're all too familiar with.
Right. Yeah. You're right. And what would have happened? Our business would have died. It would have failed because one person is not in it with their whole heart, So,
absolutely.
Those moments of check-in, that moment of self-awareness should include, what you think somebody did to you versus what you did to somebody that day as well, just saying, because unfortunately, I wish people were more transparent with one another because we're not mind readers. So, just to assume that this person should have apologized to me for this or that is not true. The other person, unfortunately, I've learned from like so many experiences that it's just not the case that the other person knows what's going on. And I'm wrong to assume that so this person knows what they're doing or they should have said something to me because this happened or that happened. And meanwhile, that person is oblivious that something even happened. And because they're not seeing the same side of the whatever, They're
not wearing your lens. But honestly, you bring up two really good points, Ginza, and that's of self-awareness, maturity, and understanding someone else's perspective. I feel like as we grow older, we shouldn't be comparing ourselves to what it means to be 18, 22, or 30. I think we should be assessing ourselves. Are we self-aware? Are we mindful? Are we, open to other ideas? I think that's where maturity. Yeah. I think that's when you know that you've grown into a mature person. Is when you hit those points.
Yeah, and then you get I think that you would be on the right path or like in the right direction to actually. Then you won't probably have to wear as many masks, and it might not just take a lot of energy, right?
Great point. No, absolutely.
You will be
because it does take energy. You're absolutely right. To wear masks takes energy. I mean, look, I've worn masks before, and I can tell you myself that like doing that, like when I was with like people who are like overly religious. Now, just to be very clear, like there are people who are the right type of religious, but these are the type of people that are very like outbursty type,
right?
And just sitting with them, it's like, why are you like this? And it's taking me a lot of energy to be quiet right now.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
Energy.
That's just an example.
It takes energy. It takes a lot of energy, and then at the same time, you're like, nobody cares about me, and like I'm being this way, but then they don't even care about me. They're not even.
And then you start ruminating, and then worrying, and then twisting to anxiety.
Yeah, but I think, it's so stupid.
But I think you mentioned this briefly, Minahil, and that was about. Like, has a person ate today, right? I think energy also comes down to like physiological energy. Has a person slept? Has a person ate? Has a person, I don't know,
just gone on with their life, right?
Yeah, exactly.
The people on the outside, you know, that's what I'm saying. Like, if you're one of those people to be blessed with, you know, other people around you who care about you, because that is a blessing.
That is a blessing.
All right. I have friends in school. I had friends in school. They were like, yeah, no, we're the only people. I'm the only person here, so I need to find people from my own country and become best friends with them because I don't have family around here. I'm the only person here. So like that is itself, you know, blessing. If you have people around you who care if you've eaten today or not,
yes,
you know, keep those people close.
Yes.
You never know when you're going to need them, you know. You might hate them, but, you know, I feel like we as young adults going on to like, you know, well, adults, right? I think that we need to understand that not everybody is an enemy and that like, pick a couple of people who you absolutely trust with your life and understand that if you're going to grow in this life properly, somebody that you're proud of, you're going to need other people's help.
Absolutely.
You know, you're definitely not taking up my time or like, you know, eating it up or anything like that. If you do it the right way, it's a give and take, right?
Absolutely.
If you become their person, they become your person. I think that that's a beautiful thing.
Of course.
It helps you grow as a person and, you know, you go on and do amazing things in your life. That's what I think.
I think, you know, we're all three of us are very privileged to be able to go to college and you know, have an education. However, there's another form of education, and that's people. Like, if you meet people from other countries, other religions, other identities, your mind would be blown that how much is there to learn about someone else? Yeah. And honestly, that's a blessing too. Befriend that person because you'll see how they handle certain things and how we handle certain things and how similar we are because of the human experience. I think we forget that all the time. If you pay attention to the news, you forget that we're all human. But you know, like myself, like I was on our train ride home together. I was like, how am I going to learn anything from people who are completely separate major than me? I don't know anything about business or I don't know anything about design.
Right.
But look at where we've come.
Yeah, I agree.
We have collaborated. Look at our differences. Men, women, right? Same culture. Okay. Cool. Different majors. But what have I learned from you guys? I've learned a lot from you guys. And I think that's incredible to have that experience with anyone. Try to step out of your comfort zone. Try to step out of your norm and ask someone else how they deal with their baggage. Because guess what? The Japanese exchange student who identifies as male, and that's in my course or whatever, or maybe is taking a class next door and we had an interaction during lunch, could end up being my best friend because you never know what they're going to bring to you or what idea they're going to have. Because remember, they're also doing what we're doing, the human experience. They also have emotions. They have a consciousness. They have a mind.
I agree with that. And I have like personal examples. I have a friend who she came up to me actually in like my sophomore year of college. And she's like the complete opposite of me or any kind of a friend that I would ever befriend. And she's like super outgoing and I'm outgoing, but she's outgoing in a way of like, whoa, chill. Like she walks, like I remember we had drawing class together and she walked into the room and she would like walk like, you know, swinging sideways and she would like flip her purse on the little table. I know, and then she put her coffee down and then one day she just like came up to me and said, hey, let me see your nails, and they were just like blue or whatever, and then we just like started talking. And I've like learned so much from her in terms of how to adapt to different people. She, you know, every time I see her every week, we have class together. And she just brings a new, you know, thing every week. And I just like learn something new from her like every week because she's just so opposite of any kind of friend that I would like ever have. It's crazy.
See, it's good to always look at people's differences because even like this is my family, so you know, always people have this assumption that you have similarities, but like my cousins and I, not only are we all different majors and different identities and different everything, oh my god, are we different from each other. They're very quiet, very like I have cousins that like literally don't speak a word, but they have a lot to say, but I guess they just never say it. Just also whatever, that's a whole nother conversation. But like they know me, like when I enter like a gathering or something, I am super outgoing because I don't want to deal with anyone's BS. I'm here to party. And I'm already a hyper person. So it's like, I have to understand that just because everybody else is not hyper like me doesn't mean that they're depressed. Doesn't mean that they're angry. And then the other people need to understand
Yeah.
The other people need to understand that if I'm not being quiet, I'm like I could be hyper and serious too. I know it's a weird combination, but like if something serious situation is coming up and I'm talking a lot, it's not because I'm an expert on the issue. It's because I'm passionate about talking.
Right.
So it's like
true.
understanding other people
Other
and their
people.
judgments, because it's
Yeah.
like I know people, especially in high school, use all the time. Oh my god, she's such a psycho. Because why? She's just like that. Why are you diagnosing her? Oh my god, he's manic because he does this. No, maybe his sleep schedule is just messed up, and maybe he's, don't make assumptions about
That's
people
so
just
funny.
because of their personality traits. There's a
Yeah.
difference between a personality disorder and a
Yeah.
personality trait.
Yeah.
The more that we want to understand emotional regulation, mindfulness, and self-awareness, we have to understand that the way that people express themselves are vastly different, even among a family system.
Completely agree.
I
And
agree.
it's so important to understand that. And you guys won't believe it, but we're almost at the hour mark. And I would like to just bring one point here,
Sure.
is that we were talking about what you just said.
Yeah.
That is what leads to masks, I feel, right? Like
Yes.
that is what leads to masks. So like one example that I'm super proud of is at this table. Other Pakistani people, when they see other Pakistani people, they put on tons of masks.
Oh my
I
god.
agree.
Because of look, Yakenge.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because of
Right?
they're worried about what people are gonna say.
So and they pass that on to their kids, unfortunately. If their kids are not, if somebody doesn't understand their self-worth properly, which needs time, they're going to believe that they're somehow inferior to whatever their parents think they're inferior to. So one thing that I'm super proud of is that when we met you at that train station,
Yeah.
at Penn Station, our favorite place,
Oh god, please.
when we met there, we could have easily been like, oh yeah, so the 6 or 7 years since you haven't seen me since high school,
Yeah.
I've done this and I've done that or
Yeah.
something. Like
Yeah.
that is what I expect, and that's what I see. Unfortunately,
Yeah.
people.
I'm taking the Babylon. No, we're on the same page.
Yeah, we're on the same
Or we could have been like, no, I don't want to say hi to him.
Yes.
And you
Yeah.
could have just gone.
Yeah.
I mean, guys, don't just put yourselves on the bad boat. I could have just kept walking, flipped my hair, be like,
Yeah.
"Who are you?" And this project would have never existed.
I know.
Imagine.
You could have pretended you didn't remember us.
I know.
And then, that self-awareness moment could have been at night, instead of it was like, oh my God, I can't believe I met him and I can't believe this is going to happen.
Yes.
Instead, it would have been like, oh, what if? And that's the worst kind of regret. The what if is the worst, because
Yeah.
I know who I am with myself when nobody's watching is completely different than what I would have acted, right?
Yes.
Unfortunately, that's what our culture teaches a lot of our kids, where the kids become snobs. And it's like, why should I talk to them? Because I think that my parents don't think they're
Right.
good enough to talk to them. So I'm not going to go, and that's a mask.
That's exactly how the thought
That's a
process is.
mask.
Yeah, yeah.
That's a mask, and
It
we would have never. So I'm glad that we felt comfortable with us that day in those
Yes.
moments. We could have had a lot of microaggressions going on, which probably did. We were coming back from work and school, that we didn't
Oh,
put on
yeah.
a
Yeah,
mask.
and it was
that
very
day.
You're right.
late.
It was very
Very
late.
Yeah.
But see, because we understood these contexts.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Once you develop an understanding of people and your social skills, it's not always about being a good listener, being a good talker. It's also about understanding the circumstances at which you're having a conversation, or
Mhm.
the circumstances at which someone is acting a certain way, or regulating or expressing their emotions in a certain way.
Yeah.
And it's also not about like 24/7 analyzing them either. And let me tell you, that's hard to turn off when you're doing like therapy. So it's like, but I'm learning to compartmentalize. And guess what? That's okay. Because I'm not going to be 100% perfect. I hate those people who I really dislike those people. I'm doing it right now. I really dislike those people who sort of take things like very, very seriously. Once they become a professional, they're like, everything becomes about that. And it's
Right.
like, it's important to take a step back. Take a step back from business. Take a step back. Like, you're allowed to be yourself. You're allowed to turn your phone off. You don't have to be available all the time.
Right.
You can, what's wrong with that? I don't care if you're offended. This is my time. It's
Yeah.
okay to do that. And I feel like in our culture, that's what we see as selfish. And it's like, no, redefine selfish.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. And it's also like in our culture and intercultural concept, again, like we just use ours as an example, is that we tend to judge, we tend to put these labels on people.
Right.
I when I was younger, I didn't stop drinking milk from a bottle from a very older age than I'm supposed to, because remember, societal ruler.
Yeah.
And they would always say that, oh my God, he's gonna have the worst teeth ever. And thank God
That's a
now.
thing,
Thank
yeah.
God now I'm like satisfied with my teeth. I didn't get braces or anything. But what I'm trying to say is that like it's a thing. Like people place
people
these
think
assumptions.
that,
If you do this, you will not become that. Like shut the hell up. I'm like, are you kidding me?
It's crazy.
Leads to masking.
I know,
masking.
and
Yeah.
you know, that's what my parents did. They would mask like that I'm still drinking milk from a bottle at
Yeah.
said age.
Yeah.
They had to mask it because that's how society, not even culture, I'm gonna say society. That's how society, compares and contrasts other people. And it's like the only thing you should be comparing to is who you were yesterday,
Yes.
and not what other people are gonna think or log kya kahenge about your kids, your cousins, because you're a certain way or you're not wearing that brand or whatever.
Yeah.
I mean, this episode really does tie together a lot of things that we've talked about in the past. So if you haven't caught up to the previous episodes, please click back or go to the Spotify page to check out the other episodes.
Yeah.
But guys, until our next episode, please do yourself a favor. Take care. Take the masks off.
Mm-hmm.
Have some time for yourselves. Invest in people who invest in you.
Yes.
Yeah, it's true.
Right? And be authentic.
Yeah.
If you're the black sheep like me, don't be afraid to be different. Because guess what? One day they're going to come to you. You're going to inspire others.
Yeah.
And that's how I got through my stuff. Anyways, that's a whole nother episode. But you guys, thank you so much for being so open and understanding and mature.
Thank you.
And I think you guys are true representations of what it means to be a mature, independent woman in this society.
That's so sweet. Thank you for, recognizing that and being our friend. And we see the same thing about you. That we wouldn't have again, I really keep on thinking of what made this happen.
Yeah.
We could have never, I haven't met, so far I haven't met two Pakistani American people who are not blood related, meshing so well with one another.
We're actually being real with each other?
Yeah.
What?
Yeah, we don't have to mask around you. You know,
Yeah.
there have been multiple times where we've before starting this, the vibe wasn't right because you just stepped into something, but we don't have to mask that around you, and that's really awesome.
Thank you guys as well. So guys, we're going to go into post-show where we talk about how we felt about everything that happened in the show. We're going to take your ideas. We're going to talk about different platforms. We're going to be posting a lot on our social medias as well. But thank you guys for supporting this podcast. And, we're going to be talking to you guys again very soon. So until then, please take care. And also, don't worry about...
Woo!
Yay!
Hey!